Hey everyone, and welcome to Private Podcast, where we plug in and explore the intersection of privacy, human rights, technology, and democracy. I'm your host, Derek E Silva. Today we're speaking with Sonny King. Sonny is the Executive Technology Director at Frog, an award-winning design studio focused on furthering the human experience by helping define the future of human and machine experiences. I'm going to take a chance and say many of you have probably actually interacted with something they've built, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. Sonny, thanks so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Terrific. My pleasure. So let's dive right in. What is Frog, and can you elaborate on some of the services Frog offers?
Yeah, absolutely. Frog is a firm with roughly 50 years, a little over 50 years of history, helping our customers create new futures for themselves and for their customers, end customers, and users. So we're a design firm at heart as our center, but we've adopted a lot of capabilities, especially around strategy and strategic thinking, as well as technology to bring those new futures to reality. And as you mentioned, we've got a quite large portfolio of work in our past and in our future, and we do very significantly impact the human experience through product design. So we're very proud of that work.
Terrific. Yeah, we've got some specific stories in here we'll cover, and so that'll really impart on people just how much you've done in the past. What led you to join Frog? I was reading a little bit about your past and your experience with growing up in a house of artists, and how that impacted you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I do. My family core and center is in art and music and really the arts and culture in general. And through that journey with my family, I also discovered I have some capabilities around technology that I've been very happy to deploy in service of culture, community, and the human experience. Um, my journey is quite unique through my career, and I never understood exactly where I'd land, and I wasn't as intentional about where and how I applied myself, but really just being open to taking a journey. I had opportunities earlier in life to work in design capacities as a designer and an artist and a cartoonist, an animator. That taught me storytelling, the power of storytelling, which also taught me the power of the human existence and how to create positive emotions and impact humans. And then, as well, like I said, I discovered that I had some passion and ability to really quickly grasp technology and then use it to hopefully create wonderful things. So as the internet was evolving, I don't want to date myself, but I was able to enjoy the experience of the coming of the digital age. And so as I saw that, I saw opportunities to apply what I knew as a artist, a designer, and somebody that enjoys culture and human experience, and use technology to further that. Initially, that found me in new media, is what we called it back in the day, and that kind of
Right.
transitioned into, yeah, absolutely. That transitioned into marketing and advertising. And then there was a point in time before I joined Frog where I thought that I had really traveled the road of advertising. I really enjoyed reaching a lot of humans and a very large audience. But I thought it was time to really take a more thoughtful approach to creating experiences for people as opposed to marketing to them or
Hmm.
engaging them from an advertising perspective.
Cool.
So yeah, so I was seeking an opportunity to apply what whether they're superpowers, but certainly skills in the context of product design. And Frog certainly, I think, meets the mark of a very engaged partner with the world in designing and creating good outcomes. So I was very happy to join Frog roughly 14 years ago now.
Nice. Well, it's great that you were able to find such a good fit after, potentially ending up in a place where you're just like, screw it. Like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Absolutely.
Been I,
And I've
I've
been,
I've I'm a little bit younger than you, but I've definitely had that feeling before. Like, what am I going to do next? And I was very much a generalist. I'd done pretty much everything, and thankfully, I feel like I've found my place here. Helping build communities in the blockchain industry and hosting this podcast. So, mine's a little bit shorter, but I've had what I feel like a similar journey to you, except that I'm terrible at storytelling. It's not. It's definitely not my forte. My wife hates it when I try to start telling a story. Um, Anyway, so you just mentioned you were already in that space where I guess computer aided design, things like tools like Photoshop and such were described as new media. Um, so given that experience with maybe some of that more traditional media, advertising, marketing, and then what you're doing right now, how do you see creative design changing with new technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of facets to that question. I'll try to maybe give a little bit of insight to a few way I think about a few of them.
Sure.
First of all, the first time that I really became enamored with technology is when I saw a gradient rendered on a screen, right? And that was when we were talking about Photoshop and raster images. I was like, wow, that is exciting. I began to see, the power of change that digital could bring. And obviously that's permeated almost our entire existence at this point and have been a part of that journey. So then that initial expression of creativity, just a gradient, for me is turned into the things that we interact with on a daily basis. So in that journey as a culture, and then that journey as how I participate in furthering it, we've seen it go from aiding in physical things like print design and the design of goods that we're accustomed to, into digital personifications of brands, right? And creating relationships that are actively with you daily and in your pocket. So some of it is enablement from digital technology and how we design. Another of it is the impact of technology on what we design and why we design it. And I think that's one of the biggest fundamental changes over time. And I'm also excited about what the future brings. I realize my excitement and the joy when I saw that first gradient is not the excitement and joy that people have today with their first interaction with technology, right? So the audience has changed along with the technology
Yeah.
that we use, and then the channels that we use to deliver experiences, right? So I'm thinking in the future, we're embracing new technologies that have privacy concerns, deep privacy concerns, and we can talk about that vector a little bit later
Sure.
potentially. But I'm excited about actually bringing technology to amplify the physical and human experience, right? So breaking out of the rectangle. We found ourselves with a rectangle in our pocket, a rectangle on our desk, and we're in the rectangle today and in the virtual space.
Yeah.
And obviously, COVID has affected how much we're interacting with those rectangles. But I would like to see us, and Frog is engaged in exploring how can digital impact our future outside of the rectangle, as well as how can we be more thoughtful inside of the rectangle.
So exactly on that point, like how does Frog help startups and brands start to make their mark in this digital world? I feel like you're more or less alluding to the fact that it's a lot harder to impress someone these days, or to make them have that whoa moment, or that ooh and ah, that at 6 years old when I got my hands on a Commodore 64 was really easy to elicit, and it's been fairly easy to elicit out of me probably up until I don't know, maybe the early 2000s, right? So that was a good period of time for me. That was almost 20 years, where it was fairly easy to impress, but we've plateaued, and in terms of user interface design, and certainly what hardware is capable of, maybe versus what people are expecting or were hoping for by now in 2021. So what is Frog doing there to still help a really large brand still impress, still break out of what they're doing and make their mark in the current mediums that people are preferring.
Yeah, we have a pretty significant history and a passion from our founder, Hartmut Esslinger, in that we think about designing for emotion, right? The emotional impact of the things that we design together, the products that we release as a business, and the interactions that we have, even during conversations like this. So Hartmut was one of the, I would say, architects of what we've come to know as design thinking. And design thinking, is a nice moniker, but I don't focus so much on the moniker, but really the intent. And the intent is to focus on discovering the unique needs of your audience and your customer, and then keeping your perspective and your aperture wide enough to discover new needs and things that may not have been addressed. And then using that and some of the methodologies, which are, process and methodologies, which we call tools nowadays in design thinking, but using them in a really intentful, I would say, desire to discover the best way to engage your customer. So this could be true for industrial clients. This could be true for consumer packaged goods, digital products, as well as physical products. We have a fairly significant physical product practice as well. Mm-hmm. But really what we want to do is create very intentful relationships with users, right? So we want to establish a good relationship, a honest and open relationship, and privacy has a pretty significant impact to that. So does inclusivity and equity. And then honor that relationship in real terms, whether it's personified through the features we release in a piece of software or the form factor of a device and how it meets their needs. But certainly we want to use a customer-centric and user-centric and human-centric set of methodologies to speak directly to the heart and the emotions and hopefully the joy that you can get and delight from meeting that need.
Cool. It's I think really illustrates the fact that you take this really seriously and obviously have a lot of background and I guess more or less just that approach that Frog takes. That's terrific. What about designing a more sustainable future? How is Frog thinking about that and approaching, especially maybe on the product side, right, the physical product side, tackling, whether you believe in climate change or not, things are certainly changing, and there's still lots of opportunities to create less landfill, more recycling, so that the amount of land we cover with garbage is reduced, which I think personally is important, regardless of your stance on climate change, who's causing it, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's another commitment that we make to ourselves as much as we make to the market, right? Is how do we make ourselves present in the world, in the new world? And a part of that is being thoughtful about what we introduce to the world, whether that is packaging in the context of a consumer packaged good, or even the amount of cycles that it takes to render a UI and the use of power in a digital world, right? So we have a number of individuals who spearhead that passion inside of Frog. And then what we've been doing over the past, I would say really 4 to 5 years in a very targeted way, is trying to institutionalize those considerations in the work that we do, and then transferring that institutional passion for judging our own impact, modifying our own behavior to create positive impact at that vector with our clients, right? So how can you as a client say package business outcome with the need to reduce waste, right? There's ways that we can do that. It's like, first of all, everything encased in 7 layers of plastic and cardboard isn't necessarily the most delightful way to create an experience for a customer when they unpackage something.
Yeah.
Right. So how can we also honor the audience that also wants to minimize their impact, negative impact to the world? So we're trying to imbue all of our processes in the way that we think and the way that we start programs and the way we talk to our customers with an opportunity for us to think intentionally about it. And like I said, sustainability is a big component of that. Inclusivity is another significant component. Equity, providing the same opportunities for those and the same experiences for those. So we really try to take a horizontal view of all those considerations in the work that we do, and we're willing to make the commitment from a business standpoint to invest in that. So yeah, that's I'm glad you brought that point up, and it's something we're very passionate about.
Sure, no, that's terrific. It's as a dad, I it's funny that you bring up the product packaging because my daughter just got handed her first brand new Barbie
Mm.
last weekend from one of her great aunts, and I think it's better than it was, but like that super hard plastic that I know is either really difficult or impossible to recycle, and and it's all intermingled with the cardboard. I'm like, this is just a mess. Like this whole thing is just like, I'm pretty sure this garbage, this plastic has to go in the garbage. Like it's just,
Yeah.
I was on the Blue Water Recycling Association's board for a couple of years. Like I know what's up there, and there's a little bit of cardboard, but I got to fish in and dig it out, and it's just
Hmm.
like I said, I think it's better than it used to be. But when I encounter products like that, I still get really frustrated. Hot Wheels cars, same thing. Like it's just tiny little bit of
Hmm.
plastic on the front, which I'm pretty sure is either too small to recycle or it's not the right kind, right? It's not PET plastic or anything like
Hmm.
that. And then thankfully I can throw the thick paper behind it in the recycling bin, but there's still portions that I think we should be able to use a more sustainable solution to package up this $1 or $1.50 Canadian car, and
Yeah.
and yet 30 something years later, I feel like I'm getting Hot Wheels cars in the exact same packaging they were in 1986. So
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And we have an industrial design and mechanical engineering practices as well, and as a part of their methodology, and when they're thinking about CFM and the material science, recyclability and
hmm
sustainability is a key characteristic of the decision making. I would say the matrix and the rubric that we use to make recommendations and suggestions. I will say another, I think, to pull on a thread that you made there is we have a long way to go as a society.
yeah,
And it's interesting, just as my own personal and probably yours, and we all have to find our own personal commitment to how we engage in the hard fight to make the positive outcomes. It'd be very easy for us to narrowly focus on designing the new things, but what impact can we make to the legacy things, right? That from a day-to-day perspective may look like minor impact, but when collected as a whole and scaled, it could have a significant impact, and that kind of forms some of our work around industry, right, and manufacturing and manufacturing processes and designing systems for the industrialized human, and then giving them the ability to optimize the things that we do so that we can lower our impact across all of our verticals. Um, but it's going to be a hard, long fight, and we still have a long way to go. And we know that there are a number of passionate partners that we work with, and looking forward to partnering with as many people as possible to make a sustainable future.
terrific. I want to ask about a product that just on the website, but I think I'm going to come back to it later because I don't
Okay.
want to run out of time to focus on some of these other core things that you're doing, and also we have that question about the privacy to get to. One of your most recognizable efforts, not for me because I haven't been there yet, but I
Yeah.
definitely did read about this, was the transformation of the Disney park experience.
Yeah.
Basically, just bringing in technology, I think, in just about every way you could, that where it made sense, but certainly helping with coordination and orchestrating at scale. Can you tell me or tell the audience a little bit more about that project and I guess the impetus for it? Like, was this an RFP? Was this a design or an idea you brought to Disney of like, hey, we've got this crazy thing we think you should do after
Yeah.
one of our partners went to a Disney park this weekend? Like, how did it come about, and what was the what did you bring to that,
Yeah.
and what was the end result?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for asking that. I was actually on that program, and it was very fun. It was very fun engagement for us. So first of all, I will say that Disney, much like a lot of our clients, had a problem and a challenge that they were trying to surmount, right? And the problem, obviously was personified through their park, and may not be entirely unique to Disney, but the way that it was presented to us was that essentially the park had lost its magic, right? So there's a number of different considerations for a park experience, and some of them sound very much like business considerations, but in reality, they're experience considerations, right? So creating a pleasing environment for the people that and the guests that join that park experience. So when you go to Disney, that used to be where memories were created that were multi-generational. Grandchildren will remember their grandparents bringing them to Disney.
Yeah.
Well, after a period of time, they got to a scale to where the number of visitors didn't really allow for that. So the leadership at Disney have focused a lot of their internal efforts on solving that problem. There were a number of ideas, and there's a number of ways to think about the genesis of the idea of the magic band. I will say that we certainly participated to a great deal in what it became. But the first remit that we actually had from Disney was to help with the entry experience, right? So how to be able to reduce the wait in lines, to be able to, positively affect the emotions of the family during their experience.
Yeah.
And typically, when we're asked by our clients to explore solving of a challenge or helping, create an outcome, we again try to have a pretty wide aperture. So we took the opportunity to talk to a number of guests, right, and really get an understanding of what it is, are their pain points, and what are their needs, what are they looking for. So through that, and I think this is something that we offer to a lot of our clients, is it gave us an opportunity to map the entire journey of a park guest, right? So from the time at home when they thought, hey, I want to create those magical memories for my child or my grandchild, and I'm willing to make the investment, which is significant, in flying the family out to Disney.
Well, I've heard.
And then, yeah, absolutely, it is not insignificant, but it is powerful. And then, so then knowing that I want my family's experience to have very unique attributes. I know they like these types of rides. They might like these types of characters from the movies. How can I give them access to that? And then when I get to the park, how do I make it a pleasurable experience? We've all seen, I think, a lot of probably pictures and images of crying children inside the park. We all know attention is something hard to get and maintain. And then there's just a lot of physical activity that's required. So we took a holistic view of that journey, and we said in reality there's probably about 25 moments, and we call these moments along the journey, to where the brand and the park interacts with the customer. So we asked Disney to become more intentional about the design of each one of those moments, and they agreed that they should. And then through that intentionality, we were able to discover moments and opportunities to create new experiences and new value. I think the one that really resonated with me the most, and I had an opportunity to embed in the park during this program in making it real.
And how many rides did you get on?
Well, I'm not so much a ride person anymore, but I walked the park. I actually ended up spending a little time in the park overnight, and that was a little weird.
Yeah,
but I really got to observe the families and observe everybody's interaction with the components of the park. It was very, very meaningful, and this is empathy, right? Building empathy for the customers and the audience.
Yeah.
So we were able to take each one of those moments, prioritize them, and start solving for them. But like I said, the one that resonated the most to me, and this is directly related to privacy, and so maybe this would be a good segue into our conversation about intentional design for privacy, is the ability for a character from Disney to greet a child by name and make sure that moment, that memory is created, and that emotional impact of joy and delight is delivered to that family for the investment that they've made to come out. And that gets to the point you made earlier about orchestration. So we knew with the power of technology, we could create the concept of identity. And whenever we create the concept of identity with clients, we need to think about, privacy and the value exchange between identity and the value that it gives to the customer or the audience, right? So we wanted to make a very intentional value statement that identity could provide for a guest. And that would be the ability to go experience the rides that you want to experience and create the memories that your family wants to experience. For us to be able to optimize that for you. And then, things like the Fast Pass came to life. Things like understanding menu preferences when you're in a resort restaurant. So knowing, maybe menu restrictions, whether it's health related, giving you the opportunity to establish the way that you want to interact with the park. And for us to be able to, as a park and an experience, use that information to create magical moments for you. And then not use it for anything else. Right.
There's the key right there. Not use it for anything else, because I think we've seen time and time again, and even I would argue some fairly staunch privacy advocates will say, yeah, there is a line where I'm willing to provide information in order for you to provide me a really great service. I've gone back and forth so many times over the last 10 or 15 years with this notion of like, it would be really cool to walk into a hotel and the concierge or whomever say, oh, hello, Mr. Silva, how are you? Because that makes you feel good. I mean, like, yeah, I'm important enough that they know my name, right? Or they're, they got AR glasses on or something, and they're seeing a little bubble above my head. At the same time, it's their property. I probably have some sort of rewards account, and therefore, obviously, they know information about me and how often I'm staying, as long as I provide my Hilton Honors number or whatever whenever I go. I get that, but it's when it gets sold to the hotel next door that they also happen to own, and I start getting emails from them, or we actually have somebody on the who works with us at Orchid who uses the line 2 address line on a form. Like, you sign up for a newsletter or whatever, or not a newsletter, you buy a physical product. Line 1, your home address. And if you don't have an apartment number or a suite number, you can easily take advantage of line 2 to put in something else. She actually puts in the company's name so that she knows if Capital One, MasterCard nice. Sends her something in the mail and line 2 says Nike or whatever, she knows that Nike either sold the information or there was a data breach or something like that. And I don't want to pick on Nike or Capital One. It's just brands that came to mind, especially Capital One, because I get stuff from them all the time, unsolicited mail all the time. But, so she knows. And I think she said that this happened with the streaming service that raised billions of dollars and then failed last year, Quibi. This happened with Quibi right after the sale, right? They declared bankruptcy, sold the property, sold all the assets. Roku got all the programming, and shortly thereafter she got something in the mail where line 2 was Quibi. And she's like, son of a gun, like, they sold my data to somebody. Anyway, let's continue on this path and talk about then, like, how do you achieve privacy by design? Like, it would be amazing for me to take my kids to Disney eventually, which my wife has been hounding me to do. And I'm not going to say my kid's name on the air because I have a thing about my kids being exposed to public stuff that they have no control over. But hi, so and so, welcome to Disney. So great to see you. I could just imagine my 6-year-old's face being like, oh my God, they know my name. Like, how crazy is this? So, like, what was that process like, and how do you think about achieving privacy by design? And I don't know if you're using that term in the same way that Ann Cavoukian did, who's a former
Mm-hmm.
Um, shoot, here in Ontario, um, not a minister. She led the oh God, I can't remember now. But anyway, she used to work for the
Yeah,
government of Ontario. Um,
yeah.
Definitely helped promote this term of privacy by design. Like, are you thinking about it in the same way that brand of that phrase is, or something more frog centered?
Yeah, I mean, well, first from a framework perspective, we we really just kind of center around intent, right? And the intent is to have true, real relationships with your customers. Um, so when you have that, it shares a lot of attributes with what Anne has described and what others in the market have described, and we're not, looking specifically to create new and unique things, but adopt whatever we can to create the right stance for our customers and really for the end user.
Yeah.
So the very first thing that we do is, I think there's two primary vectors for us to discuss. One is that relationship. Two is regulatory compliance, and we can talk a little bit about that in a moment. So first, institutionally, from a how we establish the relationship, we make sure to elevate that in the conversations with our clients, right? So when we're thinking about business outcome, we're thinking about the outcome for the user. And then we think intentionally about the implication of privacy in creating that outcome. And then typically we have things much like that's also shared with some of the legislation and even some of the legislation that was just passed in China, right? Is one the opportunity for the user to have a voice in their relationship to your brand, and then the data that they share, right? So we want them to have that voice as a true representation of our honoring you as a customer first and foremost.
Right.
Secondarily, that has a number of different attributes to it. Number one is like the controls to give you the authority and control over your data, give you control over the value exchange that your data represents, right? And an understanding, a real understanding in human terms, not in 370 lines of a terms of service agreement that nobody can scroll through.
370 if I'm
And
lucky. That sounds short.
yeah, we're trying to get it further and further down, but but yeah, absolutely. So, but then secondarily, I mean, I think that's a commitment that we bring as humans, and it's again, like I said earlier, a horizontal through our process. We bring that to the forefront, and we think about the impact to the customer. So we bring that voice in everything that we do. And then it's unique for different industries. It's, for an industrial user of an application, right, that's paid for in an environment
Yeah.
that is owned by your employer, has different considerations than the general public. Additionally, obviously, which is unfortunate from a societal standpoint, but litigation and regulation is a driver of businesses' desire to solve for that as well. So we don't specifically, our role isn't regulatory compliance, but we understand the implications of the data privacy regulations to the products that we design, and we are very intentional about that. And the probably the easiest case is healthcare for us to talk about, and HMI, right? Our commitment to the diligence that it takes to be able to say that we honor that patient experience, the privacy of that patient, and that we will do the things within our power to ensure that that honor translates to action, right? Tangible action, whether that's ensuring that the design of the technology, the platforms, and the systems has the ability to secure the data, and hopefully in a multifaceted way. Also, that the checks and balances from an organizational standpoint exist, like saying a chief security officer, right? It's like that role is critical. The business processes that allow you to manage the business of privacy are critical. So I say we lean in as far as we can, and we are very intentional about it. We might borrow components from other frameworks. I think they have, from an industry, we're starting to really understand a lot of similar desires that we have. An interesting bit, if we think about just what China, the language that China has used, and I think this is really interesting when we talk about the park experience, like you mentioned with your family. Um, so China has been very prescriptive to actually establish the relationship between data privacy and personalization.
Right.
All right, and that's the first time that I've really seen that in letter of law. So, and in reality, that's the impact where it began to rear its head and really impact society. And my role back when I was in advertising as an advertising technologist was, the quest to deliver more targeted messaging to create better business outcome.
Yeah.
We've gone through a number of generations of employing data to create value for businesses. And that point that you made is when a business collapses, where does that value transfer? Who does it transfer and how? There's a lot to solve. There's as much to solve in this space as there is in sustainability and our future as a society.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
no, I'll just say that Frog is committed to continually looking at how we engage in our commitment to becoming thoughtful partners in creating privacy, room for honest relationships with customers, and then also the business outcome that they're looking to enjoy.
Yeah. Going back to that Quibi example, I have a Roku device, so
So,
which is I know is certainly not probably the device I should have as someone who cares a ton about privacy, but uh, in that specific example, to me it feels like Roku bought all the programming, or at least the vast majority of the programming, and so if anybody was going to get customer data, it should have been somebody like Roku, who still is basically actively peddling what Quibi produced. I know they didn't get the portrait landscape dual video mode tech. Fine, I don't really care about that. But because they've actually taken the vast majority of the public facing assets from Quibi, to me it makes way more sense for a company like that to get the customer data, and then only them, or them and only the company that did get the IP to the portrait landscape switching tech, because they still have more or less a vested interest in what was produced, and then trying to continue to profit off, or to profit off of the money they spent on those assets. Whereas instead you get, like I said, random credit card companies, or
mm-hmm,
magazine subscription, or attempts to sell you a magazine subscription, and all this really old school stuff. Ultimately, that's who's bought the mailing list, essentially, the customer list, and is
mm-hmm.
now trying to use that, but they have no other interest in what else was built. So, that's my own personal opinion. I don't know if others will share it, but um, you know, and it on there's two ways to look at it. Like, yeah, that should be regulated, right? Like, if you bought something that's still going to be actively
Mm-hmm.
promoted, then you get the customer data. At the same time, that obviously really hamstrings a business who's trying to pay off creditors and shareholders and everybody else that they probably owe money to, and prevents them from re-leveraging those assets, which that's certainly an asset. And so I at the same time, if there's going to be regulation, you'd like to see it be fairly light touch, or people just to act right, and it would be the ideal. You're
Yeah.
like, just how, why didn't you just give it to Roku and be like, here you go, Roku, that you get this data because you bought the assets, and you
Mm-hmm.
can probably find some cross matches here between your existing customers and Quibi customers, and obviously you want to really go after those people, be like, hey, you loved Quibi, or you signed up for Quibi, so we've got that
Mm-hmm.
content now. Here's the Anna Kendrick short series that Quibi produced. But instead, you get randos,
Yeah.
emailing you, or mailing you at your home, um, stuff about credit cards. So
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of tension and competing interests, and I think that's one of the things that you're highlighting. And It's interesting. So we think about change agents, and we see ourselves. I think you and I both as agents of change and privacy, and our relationship with data. And obviously product and business. So I mean, I think that there's a role for the market itself to influence, right? And that's obviously, I think, what's driven a good deal of the regulation that we see today. So, I mean, I think we as audience members also have agency in helping create a better future for ourselves as it relates to data and privacy. But much like sustainability, we have to acknowledge that the journey is fraught with danger as a society, and there's a lot to move. There's straight bad actors,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's businesses with competing revenue concerns, but then there's just straight bad actors with sinister intent as well. And the human condition, and that's part of it, is so complex. I think what we can do, and what I've personally committed to do, is use my own platform as an opportunity to affect it positively as much as possible. And Frog does that in the context of business, right? Or there are other opportunities to grow the business as opposed to data mining, right? That revenue that you seek. We have a really strong strategy practice and growth strategy practice. It's like there are other opportunities and adjacent opportunities for you to create that revenue that don't require that you sell the trust of your customers.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that organizations like yours, at least, are really taking a fairly holistic approach to uh, um, engaging with your clients. It sounds like almost regardless of what they came to you for. Certainly, obviously when it comes to anything, I guess, related to software or presence on site, but
Mm-hmm.
physical product, maybe that's not, unless there's a bunch of sensors in it. Maybe that's not as big of a deal. Um, but yeah, certainly when it comes to software, places where you want people to congregate, etc., where they do need to provide some information in order to interact, that you and your team are really thinking that through.
Yeah.
All right, we're down to our last couple minutes here, and I don't want to go overboard. So let's let's see how you think about this. Are you much of a futurist? Do you like to think about where we're headed and maybe what you'd like to achieve in a few years or be
I
able to
can't help to
achieve?
think, but yeah, I can't help but think about the future. With younger family members,
Yeah.
and then also just to think about my own role in the present. But yeah, I think a little bit about it.
So where do you see maybe technology as a whole, but certainly the type of things Frog is working on and the types of things you're building? Like, where do you see that foresee that heading in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah. Two vectors. One we've already talked about, so I won't spend a lot of time there. But one is intentionality,
Hmm.
the intentionality of technology in our life, and that's whether it's an algorithm that produces a better healthcare outcome, or if it's a user experience that creates delight. Right. So we know that as a base. Additionally, I think there's opportunities for us to reframe the role that technology plays in our lives. And I say frame because I'm going to mention rectangle, and you and I talked about this a little bit, but we from a digital perspective, digital products perspective, and human experience, we've been very much tied to the rectangles that are in our pockets, the rectangles that allow us to work in this new remote and hybrid environment and workplace. We see opportunity, and we've worked with a number of clients in helping define the role of technology as it relates to the human experience outside of the rectangle. So we'll continue to work inside the rectangle and also just pure physical form. But there's opportunities for us to think about how we use technology to optimize the environment around us. Say maybe the urban environment, right? We have a practice, out of our Austin studio that we call Places. How does technology interact with the environment that the humans interact with? And it's not something that's necessarily driven by, I would say, privacy and customer data, but environmental context. If an environment knows that it has a larger audience than typically the environment is made for, what can the environment do to adapt itself,
Mm.
right, to provide the same type of outcomes? So we've experienced this as well, and I think some of the work that we've done that maybe your listeners may see on our website as well. SF MoMA and the arts. So we were able to partner in the museum space in creating digitally enabled experiences that were endowed in the arts and in no way really felt or appeared digital to users. Also, honored them from an accessibility standpoint, right? So, same experience whether you're confined to a wheelchair, limited mobility, or say no physical constraints, as well as again privacy. We were not relying on anything about you or known about you, your identity, or the requirement to share. What we were able to do is take technology and the use of technology in the environment, which was the museum, partner with the aesthetic component of the artist, the Magritte exhibit in this case, and then create new emotional impacts to the audience as they experience culture and art together. So we see this as kind of a doubling down on immersive environments and spaces that are contextual and somewhat digital enabled. But yeah, so we're thinking outside of the box. Where we hope to apply those things are in concert with the things that we're already doing from a digital products perspective, applications, and whether it's automotive mobility space or urban environments. But really, we want a more contextually aware future to where the environment, we play nicer with the environment, right? So we honor the environment, and then the environment honors us as well as humans.
But and with privacy by design, baked into that.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's part of honoring that relationship, right?
Terrific.
And I think one of the components, like I said, in my own personal point of view, is context versus data awareness, right? So you could create context that's valuable to a user without knowing anything about the user, right? You might need to know something about presence, the fact that there is a user,
Hmm.
right? You might not need to know who the user is. You might not try to guess about any of the users' perceived relationships with your environment, but you might be contextually aware of the environment itself, the number of people that are in it, the weather that exists inside that environment, maybe weather events, other environmental events that may impact those users. Like say if you're in an open mall environment and the environment itself knows it's going to rain. A pretty simple example would be deploying awnings automatically,
Yeah.
right? If you think about a reactive environment. So there's things that we can do there, and I think that we can create that future where we honor and design for privacy in the context of creating a better future together.
So I was gonna leave that as the last question, but then you brought up this whole concept of presence and knowing whether somebody's there or along those lines. And I was looking at it looks like maybe a company that Frog has invested in, but also been working with called Campfire. And
Yes.
maybe we can wrap up a couple of questions here in terms of
Yeah.
you've been mentioning the rectangles, the fact that we're
Yeah.
basically almost entirely looking at each other through screens right now. I got the opportunity to go to France last month for an Ethereum related event, so that was a breath of fresh air in more ways than one. But this doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. I've been working from home for 3.5 years, so this is nothing new for me.
Mm.
But improving that quality of work is certainly something I'm interested in. So if people go to your website and find this project called Campfire, more or less it's like VR, but it seems really designed around interacting with your coworkers, your colleagues, maybe contractors as well, and having giving a lot more presence and maybe bringing some of that real world collaboration type feel back to this. So like, is this something that you see, um, maybe not the norm, but certainly coming way more to the forefront? What was that project with Campfire like? And maybe, are you interested in using it yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll start with a little bit of context, collaboration context, in the way
Sure.
we view, and then I'll talk specifically about the campfire project which we're very happy to. Yes, we are. Have an investment in Campfire. So, first of all, Frog has spent a good deal of time in the past decade solving for human affordances in collaborative and remote environments, right? And it's been very good. It's been a passion of ours well before COVID. We could not have predicted to the scale at which it's occurred, right? But we were very happy to see that some of the affordances that we've worked on to emulate some of the needs, or at least some of the affordances that we have that meet some of the needs when we're in human space together. So we've been working with a number of video conferencing collaboration clients for quite a long period of time. So we've had a minute to think about it. When we think specifically about Campfire and the value proposition that Campfire provides, and then really emerging technology, whether it's AR, VR, XR, however you want to look at it, we do believe there's opportunity to create technology that gives us some affordances that it's more difficult to replicate inside the rectangle, right? So specifically, if we turn the lens on ourselves as a firm, we're a product design agency, right? So we have very distinct needs as an agency. A lot of knowledge workers have very distinct needs. Those that interact with physical items have very distinct needs, and that's where AR, XR, VR can really play a role. So when we think about the opportunity we had with Campfire, was to think more diligently about how we merge the physical affordances that we need as designers ourselves and people that need to interact with typically what used to be physical things. How can we design physical things together in a virtual environment? Use as an opportunity to really rethink the role of the technology and the AR technology within what could be a modified hub spoke, right? We used to think remote was the exception. Now remote is no longer the exception in the workplace,
Yeah.
right? So how can we create those affordances? And Campfire, I think obviously they're very passionate about that space as well. And I think we've worked together to establish a really good, I think, first entry into that space that hopefully will evolve. We see the need in a very narrow use case for Frog. We know that there's needs inside industry generally, and there's a significant opportunity for Campfire there. Also, when we think about the future, and then we had to talk about Facebook, even though privacy and metaverse and their release of workspaces this past week. Obviously, I think us as a society, we're going to continue to look to embrace new technology and means to give ourselves the sense of environment that physical space used to give us. And I think back to designing with intent, the affordances we need to be inclusive, to distribute equity, right? And some simple examples are the ability to raise your hand in a video chat,
Yeah.
with an emoji.
Right.
It's like being able to give voice to those that may not be as present typically in remote scenarios. So there's a lot of opportunity there. We're continuing to explore that. We have a very good, very committed AR, VR practice. A gentleman named Chuck Hughes leads that up in our San Francisco studio. And we're committed to giving us a future with digital affordances that make us, feel more at home working together. So.
Yeah, it looks like a really interesting concept. It sounds like it's easy to put together, really quick to turn on. It obviously designed for a group of people, or maybe a group of people but physically separated. Where I'm sitting on this side of the console and you're sitting on that side, and maybe potentially we could actually see each other, or at least avatars of each other while we're working together. It would certainly bring back um, some of that vibe that so many people say is really crucial from an in-person workplace. And certainly at times I don't disagree, but in I guess a more intentional way, where like you need to actually take a minute to to set something up or throw a headset on, because you're going to work together at 10:30 today or something like that, and on
Yeah.
this project together. Terrific.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've gone a little bit over, and I want to be respectful of your time. So thank you so much, Sonny, for being on Private today. It was a really interesting conversation. I hope everybody else enjoyed it too.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I enjoy the podcast, and I believe in what you all are doing, and so we're a partner in helping create a new private future together.
Terrific. Thanks so much. Everyone, thanks a lot for listening, and until next time, stay free.